Today's lecture, we are going to discuss the use of social science to solve conservation problems. Conservation science problems are often large and cannot always be solved by scientists alone. Therefore, we need to use social sciences to understand and improve conservation policy, practice, and outcomes. If we look at the wheel, we'll notice that within conservation social science, there is a range of categories. We have classic conservation social science, which is fields such as environmental philosophy, anthropology, and psychology. There is the applied conservation social science, looking at development, education, and marketing. And lastly, there's interdisciplinary social science. This is important because it's taking a multidisciplinary approach combining anthropology, sociology, political science, economics, human geography, among others, to create a field that is more explicit towards conservation social science. Why should the social sciences matter? Social sciences can play an important role in solving conservation problems because it can allow us to ask questions that can improve our understanding of conservation policy, practice, and outcomes. Social sciences can play an instrumental role in determining what constitutes effective management, governance, or communication strategies for conservation. Social sciences can also play a descriptive role by providing a historical account or describing the diverse ways in which conservation occurs in different contexts. The social sciences can play a reflexive role by asking critical questions about the way different conservation models are framed, justified, and determined to be culturally appropriate. And lastly, and in my opinion most importantly, the social sciences can play a generative role. This means that we can produce innovative conservation concepts, policies, practices, and models by using social sciences. So, who are social scientists? I would like you to take a few minutes to think about jobs and roles in social science conservation. At this point, please pause the video and write down 5 examples on a piece of paper in front of you. Now that you've written down some of your examples, I'm going to put a few of my own on the board. You may have some of these examples on your paper, or all of them, or none of them. But what's important to notice is the variety of positions that can be covered through social science. We range from scientists themselves, to lawyers, to psychologists. So now that we know who the social scientists are, we're going to look at social sciences at different scales. Social scientists might look at the federal or state laws and policies by asking questions such as how might law and policy support conservation? The social scientists might also work at the local government level looking at city involvement in green initiatives. They may look at management initiatives such as MPA use and productivity and ask how are communities and economy affected by protected areas, whereas natural scientists might only think about the animals and ecosystem impacts. Social scientists might also look at the private sector and business scale. They might ask the question, how can environmental messaging be used to guide consumer behavior? Lastly, the social sciences might look at the community, neighborhood, and group scale, assessing what factors give rise to different levels of civic engagement. Now that we understand the importance of social science in conservation efforts, we might ask the question, why is social science not more involved in conservation? The reason is that there are still many barriers preventing social sciences mainstreaming into conservation. The first barrier that we will address is the ideological barrier. Differing philosophies, worldviews, or theories can result in approaching and interpreting conservation problems differently. There is also an institutional barrier through cultures, interests, and histories. Conservation organizations and institutions are often configured for natural sciences and not the social sciences. They may value only natural sciences and will often overlook aspects of social science that lead to inductive reasoning. Third, we have the knowledge barrier. Assumptions, theories, and methods are different in all fields, and this can result in different training, experience, and knowledge of theories and methods. For example, the use of language. In an environmental anthropology paper, you're going to see very different language and style of writing than an environmental ecology paper. Because of these differences, it creates a barrier preventing these teams from working together. Lastly, there is the capacity barrier, which relates to human capital, skills, and resources. People do not understand the full capacity of social sciences conservation and therefore overlook it as a key component to their organization. For tonight's homework activity, I would like you to think about how you would overcome these barriers. Pick a conservation problem or scenario where one of these barriers occurs and create a solution of your own. I would like you to spend 10 minutes on this activity. You can choose either an ideological barrier, institutional barrier, knowledge barrier, or a capacity barrier. Please be prepared to hand this assignment in at the beginning of class. Lastly, I would like to talk about mainstreaming the social sciences into our conservation. So, the first is mainstreaming within conservation science community. What is the problem that we currently face? The problem is that conservation science is currently dominated by the science component rather than the social component. What is a potential solution? We can incorporate social sciences into our science curriculum so that we don't see them as opposing fields. We also need to mainstream within conservation agencies and organizations. The current problem we face is adapting missions to incorporate and mainstream social sciences. What is a solution? We can make a firm case and develop an understanding of the social sciences and the benefits for the organization. By doing this, you allow organizations and agencies to see the value in social science, and it'll allow them to be more willing to adapt to their missions and incorporate it into their system. Lastly, we need to focus on mainstreaming within global conservation policy influencing bodies. There is currently a lack of social science incorporation in policy development. The reason we need social science in policy development is that when you're looking at policy, we are not thinking about the science alone. Policy involves many different groups of people, and therefore we need to take an interdisciplinary approach to this development. A potential solution to this problem would be to increase efforts to educate people on the importance of social sciences in conservation. A step to successfully integrating social sciences into conservation science is to develop transdisciplinary conservation teams. You will notice at the top of this table that there are 6 different bubbles with groups of people. We have social scientists, natural scientists, and humanities scholars in one group, the yellow group, and in the blue group, there's the stakeholders, policymakers, and practitioners. This creates a transdisciplinary conservation team because we have people that can cover all bases of a conservation problem. You use your transdisciplinary conservation team to undergo an integrated conservation science and practice approach. In the first box, we have a co-design situation. The problem identification and formulation and research design is created equally between the blue and the yellow team. We then move on to co-production. Research and data analysis is largely conducted by the yellow team with input from the blue, and then communications and deliberation on results is slightly more undertaken by the blue team with a decent amount of input from YOLO. We next go on to co-implementation. You'll notice here that the implement recommendations is largely blue, which means the stakeholders, policymakers, and practitioners are taking the lead. However, that does not mean that the scientists and scholars are not involved, as you can see a sliver of yellow. We next go into a fully split approach between the monitor outcomes and adaptations. The scientists, scholars, stakeholders, policymakers, and practitioners are all equally involved in monitoring the outcomes and adapting solutions. This integrated conservation science and practice approach allows social scientists to take an interdisciplinary approach, and it allows for a stronger problem-solving team. To finish up today's lecture, I want to talk about tomorrow's class activity. You are going to be working in groups and choosing a conservation problem and determining how social science can be used to improve that problem. You'll be addressing the barriers you'll face, how you plan to mainstream the social science into your field, and what kind of transdisciplinary team you will use. Your solutions must be different from examples provided in this lecture. More details will be provided tomorrow in class, but if you want to prepare, you can choose a conservation issue of your choice to work on. Lastly, if you would like to do any further reading, please look at the below citation in which this lecture was inspired by.